So WWDC was announced this week, June 5th. We will probably send an army of people. We could do the preview. Like WWDC is kind of like a known quantity in the base level, right?
Yeah.
They announced the new versions of iOS, macOS, tvOS, HomeOS, all the OSs, watchOS. And then maybe we usually see a preview of some new hardware. This year, that piece of the puzzle is loaded with meaning, right? Because people think it's going to be the big mixed reality headset. And there's like a lot of reporting about it in a way that is unusual in tone and unusual in volume, I would say.
Okay, I'm really glad you said that, because I was actually trying to remember in prepping for this, if there has ever been a sort of run up to an Apple product quite like this one. Because like when the Apple Watch launched, there was a lot of smoke that there was going to be a watch. That was kind of all we knew about it, right? But it feels like as Apple gets ready to come out with its mixed reality headset, which we think is likely to come at WWDC, though we should get into why suddenly there's questions about that. We know a shocking amount about what the thing is going to cost, what it's going to do, what it looks like, how it works, how people at Apple feel about it. Like, can you remember another time when it feels like a product Apple is working on this much feels like it has been sort of out there in the world this much ahead of time?
The iPad.
Was it?
Yeah.
Did the iPad have that same like sense of just the grimace emoji that seems to be surrounding the mixed reality headset?
Well, it did right after, because everybody thought the name iPad was stupid, but I actually don't remember if it was there before.
No, it definitely had more hopes and dreams, but if you just remember, they had to like go to the media. Like Steve Jobs announced the iPad and he was like, this is the future of newspapers and magazines. So like, and then remember like Rupert Murdoch made the Daily.
Oh yeah.
RIP the Daily, which was actually great. And the staff of the Daily has gone on to do amazing things around the industry.
Yeah.
Because he assembled like an amazing team to make that magazine. What was it? It was like an iPad app that updated with news every day. And then it failed.
You could turn pages. It was the most like anachronistic thing I think Apple has ever done. It was amazing. They made a print magazine that you could only read on the iPad.
It was truly strange, right? But like, because they had made all those deals, like a lot of people had awareness of the iPad.
Yeah.
And like pre-baked good thoughts about the iPad. Like they were rooted in actual experiences. So like, I would just like rewind you to that. Like, yes, the iPad was that thing where the hype around it was so high and enough people had like sort of used it that there was like a level of doubts, right? If you remember, it's just a big iPhone was like
totally,
that was correct.
Yeah.
It turns out years later, it's a big iPhone with some features of the Mac, and it should just be a Mac, remains the gestalt of the iPad.
Yep.
But this one is different. It's more than that, right? And I think it's because the iPad was obvious. Like in the best possible way. You should make a really big iPhone. People love iPhones. People will love this thing. And there's all kinds of stuff you could do. You can just imagine where it will go. You can imagine how to make it, right? Like make the screen bigger and like whatever.
Right. You made a thing that's all screen. Do more screen. Apple
now with the mixed reality headset is operating in the context of, well, we have them. They exist as products. There's the Meta Quest Pro sitting right behind me on that shelf there. Is not been charged in weeks, months, like whatever. So Alex Heath, when he was at the information, broke the price like $3,000. That was his scoop. It's held up so far.
Yep.
And then there's this stack of problems that we just know really well because of the Meta Quest 2 and just the reality of what these problems are. Like, you've got to build a headset that doesn't look ridiculous. Very few people have accomplished this. Maybe no one has accomplished this.
I would argue 0 people have accomplished this. Yeah.
Yeah. They're just familiar now. They're not ridiculous.
Right.
It's like clowns. Like, you know what a clown looks like? You're not like, oh my God. No, that's ridiculous, but like a familiar way.
Yeah.
It's got to have a processor in it. It's got to have a display system that doesn't suck all the power. It's got to have a bunch of cameras. You got to process the cameras in real time and augment the information. Like, we've done this stack on the Vergecast 100 times. The problems here at every level are novel computing problems.
Yes.
And then you're constrained in power and battery life and all this stuff. And so Apple's solutions, as far as we understand, are like external battery pack. Oof. They don't want you to wear it all day. Really high price to make it clear this is not a mass consumer product. And then the reporting that's come out over the past few weeks are like, they're searching for a killer app. Mark Gurman said this will have the same curve as the watch. Like that's their hope. And if you will recall, the watch launched, it was really messy. The battery life was constrained. And then they figured out it was a fitness tracker with notifications. And now people love it. And also they use their ecosystem lock-in ruthlessly to make sure it has no competition for iOS owners, whatever. But here it's like at every layer, there's a novel technology problem and there's no killer app because they're not going to do Gran Turismo VR on a $3,000 headset. They're just not going to do it. And also they suck at games. Like, yes, they have Apple Arcade, but you're just not going to buy a $3,000 headset to play Monument Valley. You know, it's like just not going to happen.
Well, apparently the thing that they're talking the most about is, I think Tim Cook keeps calling it co-presence has been the thing that's been reported, is basically really great video chat and this feeling like, you know, I can see through your eyes because you're wearing the headset and it's looking out. And that
shit's going to make people vomit all over everything all the time.
Yes, 100%. And even to the extent that like that is cool as far as it goes, like I think we've all arrived at a point where we've decided that Google Meet and Zoom are pretty good for what they do. And the bar for like, let me get dedicated hardware to have a meeting every single time is so much higher than anybody realizes. And like, this is what Meta has been trying to do for a while. They're like, what if instead of having a Zoom meeting, you had a meeting in Horizons and you all sat around a table and didn't have legs and made weird faces at each other? It's like, actually, no one wants that.
Well, I would say Horizons is so hard to use that I don't even know if I don't want that. Right? I know for a fact I do not want to use their software.
Yes, that's fair.
Like without question, the idea, I have the remote desktop server on my Mac and they're constantly updating it. Like every day it's like a new version of the Meta Quest remote desktop. It's like, why? Like, shouldn't you spend all your engineering effort on like joining a meeting and not having it crash?
Well, so that's kind of the thing, right? And this is what you're talking about having to solve all these problems simultaneously. Like, have you ever seen the movie The Kingsman?
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you know the thing in The Kingsman where to have a meeting, you sit down and you basically put on a pair of like Wayfarer sunglasses and immediately around you, as you sort of sit at your chair at the table and everybody else is sitting at the same table in other places in the world and their holograms show up with you. So it appears roughly as if you're all sitting at a table. Super into that. That sounds great. Short of that, I suspect almost every experience that isn't that sucks and will be more work than it's worth to just talk to your coworkers or friends.
What if the mixed reality headset let you have feet?
That's the big winner.
That's the winner, right?
$5,000. I'm in.
Look, Zuckerberg has already promised feet. The brightest minds in technology are working on feet.
To be fair, he said legs. We have not talked about feet yet.
Apple's going to skip legs and go straight to feet. And you're going to be like, wow!
You have no legs, but feet.
Yeah.
You're just feet and hands, nothing else.
Like
little
this
cartoon
emoji.
character.
What's that? You know, the emoji that's just the face with the hands.
Yeah, exactly.
You're now feet.
So the Kingsman thing is like, that's what everybody wants.
Yes.
Right? That's a useful analogy for this. That movie is also really funny. You should go
It's a
watch
great
it.
movie. Everybody should watch it. Yeah.
But every time I see that scene, I'm like, okay, how do you know what chair everyone's in? How do they know it? Like are they all in the same room, but the room is empty?
No,
It's
they
algorithms.
they all have the same room. I think I could be wrong about this. I haven't seen.
But do they all sit like, what if you screw up and everyone sits at the head of the table?
Well,
Like just the amount
there's a lot of lap sitting happening.
there's-
The future
and
is
like,
sitting on each other's laps by accident. That's what it is.
And then you need a picture of them, of their faces, right? And if you're wearing this Apple headset, you've got to recreate that face. So like you're just creating this like stack of problems that is vastly more expensive and vastly more complicated and vastly less reliable than getting on a plane.
Yes. And I think my running theory is if you solve 60% of that problem, you've made everything worse. And that actually the only way to do it is to fully all the way completely do it. And I think like one of the things that it seems possible that Apple is going to do is basically render big screens as you use these things, that I think rather than try to do some of the AR stuff, it'll just kind of look like you have a big floating screen in front of your face. And that is substantially less exciting, but mitigates some of the like crappy uncanny valley of all of this, I think. But yeah, I have such a hard time imagining that Apple has solved every single one of these problems in its fullest way in order to be able to do this. And I think it's a real bummer for Apple Like if I work at Apple, I'm really, really upset that all of this is coming out, because even to the extent that it's going to dull the hype.
This is the reporting, right? This is what you and I are both noticing. The stories that are coming out are reflective of that happening.
Yeah.
One of the stories is the design team didn't want to ship it and Tim Cook overruled them.
Ooh.
Now, obviously, every story like this is people will tell you it's too simple. That's not how it actually, like, it's a big company, lots of process, but like that's a story that somebody wanted told, right? There's a group of people who thought this isn't ready yet.
Yep.
And we shouldn't do it. There's other stories about people being worried about the price. There's other stories about people saying there's not a killer app and like co-presence like this isn't going to do it. I don't want to knock this, right? Like it's, if you can get to AR glasses, which is where Apple wants to go, which is where Meta wants to go, that is the dream. Like,
I hope this is awesome. I really, really, really do hope this is awesome.
This is also like probably the most ambitious Apple's been in a while, right? Like Apple's whole MO, I think they even mention it in the New York Times piece about people being nervous and not really wanting this thing to go out, was that Apple usually waits until the market's kind of mature. Like when the Apple Watch came out, Fitbit was already huge. People were wearing these bands all the time. So people were like, oh yeah, it's a new band, but it's better. The iPhone was the same thing. Smartphones had been around for a while. They just figured out pinch and zoom better, laptops, everything. And this time they're like, yeah, this market is not mature.
Yep.
It has not proven itself in any way, shape, or form. We're going to do it anyway. And that's just super unlike Apple.
so I would make the comparison to the watch, right? They did create the smartwatch market. Like the Pebble existed, but everyone kind of knew that wasn't it, you know?
Yeah.
They created the modern smartphone market. Like Nokia existed, and I'm sure people are going to start sending us angry emails, but like those phones were not mainstream in this country. They were in some cases mainstream in Europe.
Well, but they took something that was already deeply flawed. Like these were other places where it was super, super deeply flawed. And Apple said, we're going to make it perfect. And they did. How do you do that with VR?
Right. So Steve Jobs used to be able to put up the photos of the competitor products and be like, look at this shit. Right, I fixed it. Right. With the watch, they were not able to do that. Right. And this is kind of like Tim Cook's legacy, is he's pushing them into categories that have not yet been defined. And the watch was a real mess. And the thing with the watch was that it had conviction behind it. This is what Johnny Ive wanted to do. We had Trip Mickle on the show. He wrote the great book about Johnny and Tim and the legacy of After Steve there. This is like Johnny Ive wanted to do it. It's a product that made sense. Like intuitively, you're like, do I want a computer on my wrist? And everyone thinks about Dick Tracy. And the answer is yes.
Yeah, 100%.
They didn't know what it should do. And the battery life was a mess and the screen was all this stuff. But they knew that like this category should definitely exist. And there's enough value that is like articulable. Like you can say what the value will be if we get everything right along the way.
Well, and even to the extent that they were wrong about what the watch was for, which is I think the like legacy of the watch, and as we've talked about, is that Apple was right about the hardware and totally wrong about what people were going to use it for. And it took a few years for them to realize, oh, this is just fitness and health, right? Like we can stack other stuff on top of it, but fundamentally what people really want is a better Fitbit. So they just built a better Fitbit, and now here we are. But they were right, to your point, Neil, that like what people wanted was on their wrist. What they wanted on their wrist, Apple was wrong about, but they were like, we can focus on this space and figure it out. What is not at all clear is if people want stuff on their face.
Yeah. For any amount of time.
Like not even a little bit clear. Yeah.
Back in the watch days, I had this, like a formula for thinking about it, which is like the more it touches your body, the more value it has to provide and the less you should care for it. And you can just like monkey with the variables. And so my best example was glasses. Right. Glasses are pretty finicky. You have to care for them. You can't break them. If you break them, like you're really screwed. Like I wear glasses, you know. I worry about losing my contact lenses all the time. Like, right. So there's a lot of care in there on your body, but the amount of value they provide to you is immense. So you just like put up with it and you don't think about it too much. And then there's like clothes where, depending on your relationship to clothes, if you're the swag pope or you're just like me, you know, there's a big spectrum of how much you might care about your clothes. We have to care for them a lot, but they provide value. They make you feel good about yourself and stuff. And the watch was like, it was wrong in a bunch of the variables in the beginning, right? It wasn't useful enough. It was like kind of hard to use. You had to care for it a lot. You had to charge the battery every day. And it was like on your wrist. And like, you just kind of, and like, they just got it wrong in the beginning. Like and then they really increased the value in health and fitness. They made it easier to care for, right? The battery started lasting longer. And like they aligned that equation such that the watch is like a really good product. Like I really like my Apple Watch Ultra. Do I worry that everyone can read every notification that I ever read from like 100 meters away? Like I do, but like I still love it. The face computer zone, those equations are just completely out of whack, right? They're like almost all universally hard to use. You have to care for them a lot. You have to put them on your face, and they like don't do anything. The best thing that you can do in them is play games. And like if you are a Gran Turismo person, go spend all of the money on PSVR 2 and play like it is great. It is an incredible experience. But that's it. You know, like none of the other stuff is quite there yet. We should come back to this equation around headset time and like try to lay it out. If people have thoughts on like what that equation is, and, like what the variables are, but like it's a really helpful way of understanding. Like the second you strap it to your body, like you start the amount of value you have to deliver starts going up in a way that is just enormous.